Could I introduce the director after extremely good breakdown of the film, Dominic Allan. First of all, I'd just like to say, this is a labour of love, I believe you said. Why? What was it about Calvet?
I mean, I'd kind of burnt out doing commission TV, if I'm honest. I kind of burnt out doing commission TV. I think if you know, I'd been a hired hand, if you like, sort of making documentaries, and fabulous as it was for television for some time, but I think that if you're making films to a remit for a Strand or for a Channel or whatever, you know, you always put I always put everything into everything I did, but there's a point at which you kind of, the fire dies inside, the light goes out. And I was living in South America for some years, and I met this man, and it relit the fire, and I just thought, you know, I mean, I felt compelled to make a film about this guy, and I saw it like that. I mean, that's just, I mean, I saw it, I never heard a story like it, and he was very suspicious. He used to say, you know, why is it you want to make a film about me again? You know, quite a lot. He used to come back on that, and I'd say, look, you know, it's going to be very, you know, it's shockingly honest, it's dark, it's going to come from a very dark and violent place in a sense, but I see it as having an extraordinary message of hope, which I think will help a lot of people. And I just thought it was an extraordinarily inspirational story, and I saw it as, actually with Paul, when Tom introduced me to Paul, one of the first conversations we had, I said, look, the way I see this is that it's a movie. It's a documentary, but it's a movie. I want the experience of this is when, you know, when you go into this, that you're grabbed and you're taken through, and your experience as a viewer is as a movie, but it sustains that documentary integrity. I mean, it's a documentary at every turn. So that's how I saw it.
We should I would argue we should throw away this idea of documentary versus feature film. We should actually say it's a cinema or it's television, really. That documentary in the cinema has to work like cinema, and that's what it has to do. So I think it's, I guess part of the problem we have a nomenclature problem, you know, of describing things, and that it can be factual and it can be non-factual, be truthful, non-truthful, but it's in the cinema that has to operate according to certain conditions that exist in the cinema.
I was just wondering what happened to the paintings on the wall. Like, were they destroyed or?
The painting, right? The paintings you see in the film were the paintings. Actually, when he left the house, somebody had the foresight, or, you know, saw to send in a couple of photographers. So those paintings you saw in the film, what I did was, I mean, it was quite strange, because when we went back to both the club and the house in Costa Rica, those places were empty, because the woman who had bought the house from him still owned it and had just thrown out a tenant who kind of half trashed the place and was in the process of repair, so it was in this kind of mid-state, which really worked well. I mean, just that's the way it was. And the club was on the market for sale. But, so we just, you know, how to best recreate that again without, we just, you know, we projected those paintings back on the walls in the places where they were, so that's how that worked. But they were the real paintings. The woman then, who bought the house, then painted over the whole thing. Apparently, I heard that she painted over it about 7 or 8 times. The paintings kept coming through the paint. But he actually, I think, said to her before he signed on the deed of the house and sold the house, he said, you know, they'll be worth something someday. You should keep something. He was right, because I'm actually now 3 years later he was exhibiting in New York. But no, she painted them all out, and they're there somewhere beneath all that paint, but they're still there. But those photographs were the real thing.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 questions. 1, when did he and how did he become recognised? And 2, the sound design plays a very strong part in the portrayal of the story. At what stage did that come into play?
First of all, his as an artist, he got it. There were more and more people going to Nicaragua at that time. This was 2004 to 6, and he had this cafe restaurant where I met him actually, and there were people who were going past his studio and were noticing him. So he already was starting to do mixed exhibitions and so forth. Though actually the particular gallery in New York, he went to New York and wanted to visit them because he'd seen their gallery and thought they were people that he would be really interested in showing his work at. But he had a lot of interest. He had an interest from quite an influential guy in the art world in France who looks after the art collections of the French government and takes care of Picasso's family collection. He was very interested in him and his art, but they actually parted ways because, and this is interesting because it's a testament to Jean-Marc's, what he does, and I think this is why his art spoke to me in the first place, because I don't know a lot about art, but when I first saw one of his paintings, it absolutely was screaming out of the wall at me. It was like brutal communication, and this guy that he met from France started to sort of kind of mentor him a bit and say, well, why don't you try this and why don't you try that and have you thought about it? And eventually Jean-Marc just said, listen, just get out of my face, I do what I do and that's it. But because it's such a purging, and that's what he does and that's what he knows to do, and I had great respect for him actually, and he just continued doing what he did, but it grew. But the galleries, some galleries noticed him in Nicaragua, some, there's a particular gallery in New York he went to visit and they just grabbed him. The second question, just remind me, sound. Yeah, no, that actually came, Paul Carlin and Max Bygrave. Max Bygrave is an extraordinary sound designer, lives in the West Country. Extraordinary sounds this guy creates, and for what we were trying to, because it was a movie, what we were trying to do with the film, which is very different and off-kilter to what perhaps most people's perception of documentary should be, but Paul Carlin, very talented editor, latched onto that very early and was a friend of Max, and Paul and Max were quite responsible.
If I can just a little indulgence, there's a lovely little Max Bygrave story. He's worked on some of my films. He's fantastic, very focused, very in his space, And he was once nearly arrested for chasing a car through a village. He lives down in Somerset. And it was early in the morning, and he was suddenly seen running out of his house with virtually no clothes on and chased this small car around the village, went on and on and on, and eventually ended up where a complaint was made, the police came and everything. And it was rather bizarre behavior at 6:45 in the morning on a Saturday morning, just running out of your house and chasing a car. And it turned out that the fan belt had a flayed edge to it, so it was creating a whoop noise. And he was chasing this around because he heard the sound, and he chased after to get it. And the thing about Max is that he has the most bizarre collection of unusual, weird, wonderful sounds, which I'm sure he hasn't even catalogued it, but that's who this guy is. And I could recommend him to any filmmaker, a brilliant sound designer.
We have time for 2 more questions. The gentleman at the back has been very patient.
First of all, my question was that Calvet went to live in Central America to get away from some of the problems that he had caused in the past. How difficult was it for him to bring that out in a film? And did he fear any retaliation from the gangsters that he ripped off?
Yeah, the first part of the answer to that is that Jean-Marc, and the same when the film, I met Jean-Marc at a time where he needed to tell, and he needed that out. He needed to purge. These paintings, as you see, is a purging, and the film was the ultimate purging, really. Jean-Marc told me later that really his motivation for doing the film was therapy. So that was why he did it. He saw later why I wanted to make it.
Which was not therapy.
Which was not therapy at all, but that's fine. But he needed to tell. He even said to me, I think in 2006, he said, he used to say of his paintings, il faut que ça sorte. You know, it has to come out. Everything has to come out. He needed to. I think there becomes a point, if you understand, there comes a point where if you're living with all that and you've had, you just need to offload that. And he wasn't interested in this person he used to be, and so that had to come out. That's the first most important thing about Miami, because he didn't care. That's the thing. The other thing was, it was 7 or 8 years after he left Miami when we made the film, and if you pop his name into Google, you could almost come up with his street address. It's not hard to find Jean-Marc Calvet. He said that, if that guy, if somebody turned up and he got a bullet in the head, so be it. That was the point that he'd arrived at in terms of needing to tell. We talked with lawyers, we talked with, it had to be Jean-Marc's decision in the end if he wanted to tell that part of the story, and he absolutely did. The guy in Miami also was quite an addict. He had, shall I say, quite a few business problems, and there's few reasons why that guy may not be around anymore. But essentially, it was Jean-Marc just saying, I want to tell this, I want this out.
One of the things I loved about the film, which involves the editor and the sound designer, is that it would have been so easy to make that period of his life, his backstory, rather boring and plodding, where he simply told the story. But I think that the combination of his personality, the editing and the sound design, are so kind of bonded. It's almost as though the editing is like him. The editing is another way of expressing his personality. And I think that's a real sense of achievement.
Well, Paul did a great job there, because it is the construction of the film and the pace of the editing and the charge of that it follows the evolution of the character, and I think that's brilliantly done by Paul Carlin.
Just wondered, how did you get the funding? How long it took you, and
Sorry, I didn't get the first
funding, budget, and how long it took to make it?
There speaks a filmmaker.
Indeed.
It was.
Always a question.
I set out when I heard that story. When I heard his story, I first thought, okay, do I write a screenplay or do I make a feature documentary? And my recent past has been in documentary, and I thought, well, this is just too good to turn down. Just in terms to not do, just because I saw, and I thought it would take me 2 years, and it took me 4. The funding was extremely difficult. Anybody who makes documentaries knows that it's extremely difficult. But going back on, I saw it as a movie, not a documentary, but I knew that it would, obviously in terms of the market, it was very difficult to raise money. We found some small amount of money from a cultural fund in Provence, which is a part of the CNC. We got some money from the Channel 4 BritDoc Foundation, who came on board too, who were fantastic. And I even threw a bit of money at myself. It was just something that, as did my brother. And we got it made, and it wasn't an expensive film to make, really. But it took me 4 years. Very tough to write. We'd actually, I tell you, the first place I went to look for money was France. And almost, don't disrespect anybody who's French in the audience here, but I have a lot of history in France, and I found that very difficult to break into the French industry. It took me 2 years looking for it there, and really very small amount. It was really the UK that came through in the end on seeing the power of the story, I think.
And you're self-distributing, aren't you?
The cinema release came about. It was premiered at joint premiere at Edinburgh International Film Festival and Sheffield DocFest, and I never envisaged actually this film having a UK cinema release. It was just that in Edinburgh we had an extraordinary response in the cinema to the film. We had very well attended screenings and a buzz that was created that I hadn't experienced before. I just thought, okay, well, the experience in the cinema was very strong, and the manager from this cinema in Edinburgh, which was a Picture House Cinema, Cameo, came up to me afterwards and said, we just want to have this film back. Have you got a distribution deal and so forth? And he said, even if you don't, then maybe we can do something. And really, I looked into it from that point. And I think there's a lot of people now, especially in feature documentaries, who are starting this new paradigm of distributing your own films. And so I looked into that, and I mean, you know, I have to say, I thought it was going to be very. It wasn't. I mean, maybe the word had got around so that people knew about the film. That helped a lot, especially because it had played both in UK and elsewhere at some quite big festivals. So that obviously helps. But before I knew it, we've had, as a commercial cinema release, we've had 15 screenings in 6 cities across the UK. It's been great.
Dominic, thank you very much
Thank you
for being here and for the film. And Tom, thank you very much for being here too.